And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And it's great to have Christina Bobb back with us once again. Christina, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to be back.
Great to have you. And we're going to talk about your new book, Defiant. We'll bring it up in a moment. But I think the last time I had you on, I kind of looked a little bit in your background, but didn't realize all the different things you have done in your background on the legal side, working with
Yeah.
administration, and obviously your reporting on election integrity was probably what opened the door with the
Mhm.
RNC and bringing you on. In terms of that, and you now work with the wonderful Judicial Watch, which we were
Yes.
discussing earlier. The amount that FOIs they do blows me away, and look. I think we now have a few people in the UK that really use FOIs, but or FOIs, FOIA,
Yeah.
FOIA,
For you. Yeah.
yeah, FOIA. We just go with the three letters FOI, freedom of
Yeah.
information. So yeah, I know Judicial Watch you a great work, and you've how long have you been with them? A few months now.
Yeah. I transitioned when President Trump won the election, and everybody was kind of transitioning at that point, and I opted to join Judicial Watch. So I think I started at the beginning of the year,
Okay.
February maybe.
Okay, great place to be. Let me
Wonderful.
bring up the front cover of the book, and there it is, Defiant. And it was difficult for me to get past the beginning foreword by President Trump. I mean, anyone who can get President Trump to write a foreword. Anyway, I did manage to get past those first 2-3 pages, but inside the Mar-a-Lago raid and the left's ongoing lawfare available. All the links are in the description. Get wherever you are based, but of course you can jump and get it on Amazon in different formats. But this, I
Mhm.
mean, it is fascinating story. We all remember watching these raids back in 2022, and this is a gripping, I guess, firsthand story of what
Yep.
exactly happened on the day behind the scenes, and it's a story that has to be told, had to be told,
Yeah.
and everything the left want to do to cover it up. But maybe putting the book together, and maybe give us some of your thoughts as you got the call to actually go there to Mar-a-Lago, and
Yeah.
you find out what's happening, and you describe it spending hours and hours standing outside. But maybe give us your thoughts on that day, the kind of
Yeah.
chaos that you were witnessing.
It was awful. I mean, Americans, we pride ourselves on our freedoms, right? Like we throw it in people's faces unabashedly that, we have this amazing Bill of Rights and all of these freedoms that protect us and make us, free to I guess not oppose, but like contradict or challenge our government. Like we can do that. And it was such a fundamental violation of everything American. I don't know how else to describe it. So I was working for President Trump at the time. I was one of his staff attorneys, and I was asked by his defense counsel, because he had a defense counsel for this matter. I was asked by him to be the custodian of records for Mar-a-Lago. So, you can Google my signature. It was all over the documents, and the media loved to say, "Oh, Christina Bobb's going to jail." She, whatever, whatever. They're saying all kinds of terrible things about me. None of it was true. I didn't lie to anybody. Everything I signed was accurate and true. So, there's that aspect of it. But the media loves to twist, and they wanted to make Donald Trump look guilty. They wanted to make his staff look guilty. So they really went out of their way to lie to the public and just lead people to believe that something was happening that wasn't happening. And so in the book, I was an attorney for President Trump, and I was also now, a target or a subject of DOJ FBI investigation. I was interrogated, interviewed, and required to testify before the grand jury, which was in Washington, D.C., not Florida. People forget about that, and that's important. Um, and it was so outrageous. I was keeping notes of everything that happened, like the day that they happened, the day we met with DOJ and the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, the day they raided. Excuse me. I just kept notes of everything because I didn't know how this was going to play out. I didn't know what their goal was, and so I wanted to have everything that I did documented to make sure that people didn't lie about, that it wasn't lie. People couldn't twist what I did, and so I had emails, text messages, notes from conversations I had, everything really pretty tightly documented, which is quite honestly why I think they couldn't charge me with anything because I had everything squared away pretty tight. Um, but so it was kind of easy to write the book because I had it all there, but I couldn't put anything out while the case was ongoing. So it wasn't until Donald Trump won the election and then Jack Smith dropped the charges that I was finally able to compile it into a book. And then I went and met with the president to say, sir, can I please finally tell the public what actually happened? And he was so gracious to do the forward for me. So it's all coming out now, but man, it was a rough ride for a while.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
How does it fit in with, law enforcement? We have issues here in the UK in terms of free speech, in terms of people being arrested for what they say, with 30 people arrested a day, all of that.
Crazy.
So we have a huge clampdown. But again, I always kind of make a distinction between the rank and file officers who are kind of following orders, and I hate to use that phrase, but those above them. And what was it like? Because there must have been, you would think there's embarrassment if you're a law enforcement officer, you're going to raid a former president's personal area. It doesn't seem right. How kind of did you see your engagement with law enforcement officer? Was there any embarrassment at all?
No, that is part of my favorite part of the story because I give you all the dirty details, but they were so arrogant. I mean, there was one FBI agent who was like professional and kind and recognized that this was stressful for me. So he was pretty gracious. The others, including the DOJ attorneys from Washington, D.C., from Florida, the FBI from Washington, D.C., from Florida, wherever they were from, both teams were present. They were so arrogant, and it was like they were happy to be there. It was disgusting. And that's why when President Trump got into office, that's why he had to fire all of them, because there wasn't a sense of, oh, I'm doing my duty. It was, they were genuinely trying to take down Donald Trump. It was pretty ugly.
Tell me about the media side, I guess the media circus around this.
The fake news?
Because obviously you've done different things. It was more your legal background. I think when did you work for OAN?
Right before President Trump. That's how I got to know the president. It really was through my reporting, and I got to interview him a few times. So that's how we first connected. But so I worked for One American News from 2020 to 2022, and then I joined President Trump's legal team to try to help clean up elections. I joined his legal team as an elections integrity attorney, staff attorney.
But you worked in the media, so how does you kind of were your legal side? That's how you got pulled in and called to be at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
But also you had experience in the media. Kind of how did the media respond? I guess this was just a great media circus for them all.
Oh, yeah, it was all fake. I mean, it was all fake. And if you go back and look at the articles that came out at August 9th, 10th, 11th of 2022, shortly after the raid actually took place, they were hoping, they were trying to say, they were going as far as they could without crossing the line of defamation. They were trying to say that Donald Trump was working with Russia or Iran or whoever, giving away nuclear secrets. I mean, there are articles about that that get real close to flat out accusing him of doing it. They don't quite go that far, but that's what they were trying to do. That is the case that they were trying to put together, which is why it was in Washington, D.C. They never wanted to bring a criminal obstruction of justice case against Donald Trump in Florida. I mean, one, obstruction of justice is a ridiculous case to begin with. It's usually an add-on to like a real crime, and then they're like, oh, and you also obstructed our investigation. Here, there was no original crime. Donald Trump was in lawful possession of everything that he had. He never wrongfully took anything from the White House. And DOJ never accused him of doing that. The media did. The media was like, oh, he wasn't supposed to have classified documents. And they tried to say, oh, he was doing something nefarious with the classified documents. No, It doesn't matter if they were classified or not. That's completely irrelevant. Donald Trump was in lawful possession of everything that he had. And so the media tried to turn this into an espionage, Hillary Clinton email-esque type scandal, and it just wasn't. And that's why when I was compelled to testify, when I was interrogated, I had to go to Washington, D.C. I lived in Florida. I worked in Florida. I met with President Trump in Florida. I met with DOJ, the FBI at Florida. I was on site for the raid at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. I signed the documents in Florida. Everything I did was in Florida. Why was I compelled to go to Washington, D.C. for this? Because they were trying to create a Hillary Clinton email type scandal out of Washington, D.C., because that's where they wanted to prosecute him. And they couldn't. There was no evidence of any wrongdoing. So they had to save face at this point, because by this point, they've already raided Mar-a-Lago, and you have the eyes of the world staring at the Biden DOJ going, why the heck did you raid Mar-a-Lago? And so they had to open a case in Florida just to cover their rear end. But it was a throwaway case that everybody knew was never going to go anywhere.
Was this the worst example that we saw in the Biden era in targeting President Trump? Because to go after your major political opponent is
Yeah.
something that we don't normally do in the West. It's
Yeah.
normally banana republics. But then when it happens on your doorstep, it's wow, have we actually stooped that low? But
Yeah.
was this probably the worst example of the system trying to take out President Trump?
Yeah, yes, I think it was horribly egregious. It was a blatant violation of our Fourth Amendment, which is our rights against unlawful searches and seizures, which is exactly what they did. Um, it's hard to say, though. I want to say the worst, yes, but there were so many bad ones against Donald Trump that it's like, how do you rank them? What they did to him in New York was terrible. The January 6th case was awful, although that one's going to come back to bite them for sure. So actually, all of this is going to come back to bite them. But yes, raiding Mar-a-Lago was probably the most astonishing violation of our rights that I think I've seen. But because, I mean, they took out all the stops on everything. They were horrible on everything. So I don't know. We'll see.
What was I think in it you talk about whenever it happened that the raiding party, they were
Yeah.
given access. Wasn't restrictions. I think
Yeah.
even before you talk about President
Yeah.
Trump meeting them, that wasn't. Was that before the big raid? Was that an initial kind of
2 months
engagement?
before. Yes.
Okay.
2 months before the raid, President Trump he says, "I have nothing to hide. If they want to accuse me of something, come down to Mar-a-Lago. Take a look. Like, what do you want? Take a look at whatever you want. I'll share it with you. I'll show you." Like he extended an open invitation to the FBI and the Department of Justice to visit Mar-a-Lago, and they did. And we had a meeting with them June 3rd, I think it was, of 2022, so almost exactly 2 months prior to the raid. And it was with me and President Trump's defense attorney, and then DOJ and the FBI. And the defense attorney, of course, ran the meeting, but President Trump made an appearance, said, anything you want, you can see whatever you want. Like, I have, everything he had, he was in lawful possession of, and he knew that. Um, so yeah, they were given full access, and we answered all of their questions. They were allowed to see whatever they wanted to see. When they left, we said, is there anything else that you would like? And they said, no, 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 this has been great. Thank you. This, whatever. And then 2 months later, they come and raid the place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about the lawfare process, because I think when people see this, they see kind of law enforcement officers, however you
Mhm.
want to say that, but maybe the public see that as separate from the actual legal process, courts getting involved and judges issuing warrants,
Yeah.
and those are kind of they obviously touch each other, but they're very separate. Tell us a little bit about that, the lawfare process and how
Yeah.
that was used to try and kind of target President Trump and those around him.
Yeah, and well, they're still doing it. I still am a criminal defendant as we're having this conversation. They're still trying to throw me in prison. So they're still doing it. It's not over. People think it's over because they dropped the charges against Donald Trump because he is now the president of the United States, but they didn't drop anything against those of us around him. So we're all still fighting for our lives. But the process, they are separate, but they're very related. Once you open a grand jury, that's that is where the legal process starts. Investigators can be investigating before you open a grand jury, but by the time a grand jury is open, I mean, that's where you have prosecutors involved, and um, they're going to try to criminalize something. And by the time I was involved in all of it, I mean, immediately, like not just my involvement, like right away, they opened grand jury investigations into Donald Trump. And so his grand jury investigation is what led them to raid Mar-a-Lago for no valid reason, with no probable cause. But then, like my case, they have they had a grand jury. They got an indictment by lying to the grand jury. My indictment has since been thrown out because they didn't properly conduct the grand jury. They lied to them and basically said, indict all these people. And the grand jury said, okay. And that was the process. But the process is the punishment. It's expensive. Having to defend yourself. I think President Trump, it's estimated, had to spend like $100 million just on legal fees and attorneys and all of that, defending everything that he has had to defend over the last 4 years. And I think my own, I'm a staff attorney at a nonprofit. Like I am happy with my life, but I am not making millions of dollars a year. And I think over the last 3 years, my personal legal bills were a couple million easily. And thank God some of it was covered by insurance. In other cases, donors stepped up and helped cover my bills, thankfully. But yeah, the goal is, if we can't get you, we're going to try and throw you in jail. And if we can't throw you in jail, we're going to destroy your life so that you can never, properly thrive again.
What was it like you giving evidence? I think I read somewhere that you chose not to take immunity, that
Yeah.
you wanted to. I mean, what was that process like? First of all, I guess getting a letter that no one expects, no matter what your position is, you don't expect to get pulled in to have a deposition like that, to be the target, I guess, of a very powerful committee. What was that process for you like personally?
It's terrifying. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying because I'm getting hauled before a grand jury. I'm getting hauled before the Department of Justice and FBI. The immunity issue came up when I was going to be interrogated by the FBI and the Department of Justice. They didn't want me to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights because they wanted to hear what I had to say. So they offered me, it's a little bit of immunity. It's called Queen for a Day. It basically says, we're not going to prosecute you for what you tell us. But I knew I wasn't going to say anything incriminating. I hadn't committed any crimes. I had all my documents to show exactly what happened. I hadn't done anything wrong. And I knew that if I took immunity, they would just destroy me in the media. Not just me, but President Trump. They would say, President Trump's attorney takes immunity. It means he's guilty. And like they would have just ran with it, even though they're not supposed to know who gets immunity and who doesn't get immunity. It's a privacy issue, but our privacy rights are non-existent anymore. So I struggled with it for about a day. They were clear. They're like, yeah, we're offering you immunity. But I knew that the media would absolutely destroy me for taking immunity because they would make it look like I was rolling on people or I was telling them about all the crimes that took place when there weren't any. And so in order to avoid the harassment from the media, I just chose not to take immunity. And the reality of the situation was I didn't commit a crime, and I could prove that I didn't commit a crime. And so if they wanted to charge me with a crime, if they wanted to make something up, my immunity agreement wouldn't stop them. That was my logic anyway, right, wrong, or indifferent. I just thought, if they want to prosecute me, they're going to, whether I have immunity or not. So, it's not worth anything to me. It's more important to me to keep my integrity, not take immunity, and just deal with it. And that's what I did.
What was you kind of expect whenever if something like this happens, that someone coming and breaking into your house, that the police would say, okay, I'm going to walk around your property, and you say where things are. But for the whole concept to be locked outside of your property, you standing there for, I think, with 9 hours, I think you talked about, or something.
Yeah, 8 or 9 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, but outside and stuff happening inside that you have no idea what's happening. It seems as though the whole process is to make you feel violated in some way. That's your personal possessions. What's happening? How does that wash, or how does that look to the public in general? Because even if those who were maybe not with full Trump derangement syndrome, but those maybe didn't like President Trump, surely they would have thought, actually, it seems to be going a little bit over the top.
Yeah. Well, and that did happen a little bit. When I did media and I said, no, this was so wrong. They wouldn't let me see what they were doing. I have no idea if they planted evidence or, who knows what the heck happened. I couldn't observe it. Um, the media actually did initially for like 24 to 48 hours afterwards. They were like, why did they raid Mar-a-Lago? Like, this is really bad. And then, of course, they all got on the same sheet of music and were like, oh, Trump is guilty of treason or whatever they wanted to make up. Um, but yeah, I, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. I don't believe they had probable cause. They clearly didn't have probable cause to be there. They lied to the judge to get the search warrant, and they went to a judge who, like 6 weeks earlier, recused himself from a Trump case because he said he couldn't be impartial. He was biased against Donald Trump. So he recused himself. And then that's the judge they go to get the warrant that they then lie to the judge. So like it's just compounding on all of these problems. And that's how they got the search warrant. They never, if they had gone to a truly impartial judge and been honest with the judge, they would never have gotten the warrant in the first place.
Now, there are two parts. One part is defending yourself, you and the whole team that were there with President Trump. Part of it is defending yourself and the truth coming out and putting a line under that. But the second part has to be going after those and punishing those who participated in such an act. How do those kind of two parts come together?
Yeah, well, I hope they're coming together now. I mean, we have largely survived it. I mean, I'm still being prosecuted. Like I said, there's about 60 others that are still being prosecuted, but we're getting through it. The Trump administration needs to prosecute the people that have caused all of these abuses, not just because of what they did to Donald Trump. That's terrible. But what they are doing to normal, average, everyday Americans, they're stealing our rights. They're instilling fear into people who don't want to get involved in the political process now because they're concerned that if they end up on the wrong side, they're going to get thrown in jail. And so that has to be cleaned out so that Americans know that they are free to participate in the political process without fear that they're going to end up in prison.
I'm kind of curious. Have any of those who participated in the raids, have any of them yet been prosecuted? Have they? Is that kind of further on in the process, or
Yeah.
have they received letters to say, you're going to be investigated or questioned, or is that much further on
Yeah.
still?
Well, I don't know exactly. I know that they've been fired, or at least I was told that those that participated have all been let go. I'm not 100% positive that's accurate, but I think it's largely accurate. We did see media reporting, the liberal media was crying for these people going, they're just career officials, blah, 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 blah. So I believe they've been fired. But yes, the Department of Justice and the FBI is in the process of investigating all of this. So who's been questioned and when, I don't actually know that. DOJ has not put that out. But I'm really glad that they appear to be investigating it. They've opened a grand jury, so we've been told. I believe they've opened a few grand juries into these issues. So that's all very promising. I hope that these are part of the issues that they're prosecuting, but we won't find out until DOJ makes the announcement.
What about presidents having protection from the law being used to attack? I thought there was some sort of presidential protection, or was
Yeah.
that just not afforded to President Trump? Was
Yeah.
he regarded as so awful that he didn't get treated like
Yeah.
other presidents would be treated?
It's so funny what happened because I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but because they prosecuted Donald Trump the way they did, particularly for the January 6th stuff, we now have a Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity. Now, if we didn't have that Supreme Court ruling, no doubt if Donald Trump tried to prosecute Barack Obama or Joe Biden, the Supreme Court would say, oh, presidents have absolute immunity, blah, 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 blah. But because they tried to prosecute Donald Trump, it's a very, I shouldn't say very narrow, but it's a narrower reading of immunity. And if you look at the January 6th case, what they were charging Donald Trump with was supposedly, I don't agree with their narrative, but this was the narrative, that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election and he only had a little bit of time left in office before Joe Biden became the president. And during that interim, Donald Trump tried to overthrow the incoming president. I mean, that's the crux of the January 6th case, right? That's exactly what Barack Obama did in 2016, 4 years earlier. That's exactly what Tulsi Gabbard has just exposed in the documents that she's released, is that Donald Trump won, Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. Barack Obama was still in office, and for that remaining period of time, he was trying to overthrow the incoming administration. It's exactly the same narrative for January 6th, except they actually did it. Donald Trump didn't do what they were accusing him of on January 6th. So I think prosecuting Barack Obama is fair game. I mean, if you look at the ruling from the Supreme Court on presidential immunity, Jack Smith didn't dismiss his case afterwards. The case wasn't dismissed. They had to refine it a little bit, and they had to, do a second indictment. But he was still able to prosecute. The prosecution continued even after that ruling came out. So I don't know. I would be pretty nervous if I were Barack Obama or Joe Biden.
Let's pray for that to happen. Again, you go through all of what happened in Mar-a-Lago, but you touch on other areas also,
Yeah.
in terms of those close to President Trump being attacked. And one of those is America's mayor, Rudy Giuliani. And
Yes.
it blows me away how the media have managed to rewrite the background and history of someone who was regarded in such high esteem, but then
Yeah.
because he supported President Trump, has been attacked. And of course, he was he the first one actually to get hold of Hunter Biden's laptop or
Yeah.
talk about it? That
Yeah.
seemed to be the reason why he has been in the crosshairs.
Yeah, well, I actually go into this. I did a pretty extensive interview with Rudy on these issues. It's all in the book, from his perspective of when they started attacking, and he actually takes it back prior to that. He had been getting information about the Ukraine Burisma kind of selling access to American influence that the Biden family had been doing. He was starting to get that information and was basically gathering it together in order to turn over to law enforcement. And he didn't know it at the time, but they had wiretapped his phone and his computer and his iCloud account, and they were tracking what he was doing. Not because he was a criminal, not because he committed a crime, but because he was Donald Trump's attorney. And they were trying, this is how awful it is what they were doing. But they were surveilling Rudy Giuliani, trying to get dirt on Donald Trump. And in the process, they learned how much dirt Rudy had on Joe Biden. And so they tried to take him out way early because they knew that Rudy had enough information to take Joe Biden down. And so they had to discredit Rudy really early on to make sure that he wasn't ever able to release that information. That's exactly what happened.
Another part of the attack, you think, chapter 22 titled "Keeping Donald Trump Off the Ballot,"
Mhm.
and using the 14th Amendment. And again, I remember watching when that was happening and just being utterly confused. How is this allowed to happen? And then you realize, I guess, voting is at a state level and not at
Yeah.
the federal level. But explain that, how such a process was used to stop the most popular presidential candidate from actually appearing on the ballot paper of the public in those
Yeah.
states.
Well, it was an absolutely absurd and stupid attempt on the part of Democrats to try to stop Donald Trump, but they did it. And the Supreme Court ended up ruling on that case. So what happened is, here in the states run, all 50 states run their own elections. It's not run at a federal level. And so it's the state Secretary of State who runs the elections. And what Democrat states were doing was they were saying, we're going to decide not to put Donald Trump on the ballot. We think he's an insurrectionist. He's never been charged with that, nor was he ever convicted of it. But we're just going to say he's an insurrectionist, so he's not eligible to be on our ballot. So we're just not going to put him on the ballot, which obviously is a huge disadvantage to someone running for office if you're not on the ballot.
Yes.
So that went up to the Supreme Court, and it was a unanimous decision. That's how awful it was what these Democrats were trying to do. It was so blatantly unconstitutional for them to do this, and that's what the Supreme Court said. So that got slapped down. But that's how desperate these crazy Democrats were to try to thwart Donald Trump, was to not even allow him to be on the ballot.
It seems though every part of that actually worked against them in
Yeah.
terms of keeping President Trump off. The Mar-a-Lago raid we all watched, and then the felony charges against President Trump. The J1500 J6ers actually held, many of them without any legal
Yeah.
access. Some of them held for years and years. I mean, all of that seemed to build up that actually something is not right here. Maybe one of those by themselves wouldn't have been a knockout punch, but everything together, I think it was a narrative
Yeah.
that obviously enough of the American people saw through and realized Trump's my man.
Yeah, with everything that they did to try to take him out, more and more Americans were going, "Oh, this is kind of extreme." Like, I don't know. They were, even though those that didn't necessarily like him were starting to come around going, I don't like this abuse." And then once they tried to kill him, the assassination attempt in July in Pennsylvania of 2024, that's when Americans were like, "Okay, way too far. This is our guy. He's clearly fighting for us." And I think that pushed it over the edge, and he won, outstanding by an outstanding margin.
In another chapter, you talk about, I mean, you're working Arizona on election
Yeah.
integrity, and you weren't really thanked for that. You got, what was it, 9 different felony charges. What was that like? You actually trying to make sure an election is secure and has integrity, and being attacked by officials for trying to do the exact thing that has to be in an electoral system to have a
Yeah.
democratic outcome. What was that like? That, I guess,
Oh, it's
personal
awful.
attack on you.
It's awful and terrifying and humiliating and crippling. I mean, all the horrible things that you would think that come with being an accused felon. I experienced all of it. This is my mugshot here. I don't know if you can see it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's like terrible. So I mean, it's an awful experience, but they did it to me because of the position that I held, because I was in a position of election integrity. They wanted the talking point to be, "Oh, RNC senior counsel on election integrity is charged with felonies." I mean, that was the headline. And so that's why they did it. They've never had any evidence. And I lay it out in the book. I give you all of the evidence against me. You can make up your own mind. But everything that the prosecutors claimed proved that I was a felon. I put it in the book, and you tell me if you think it's illegal. I mean, they were literally saying, they were showing I was co-conspiring with the chairwoman of the GOP of Arizona, because as a reporter, I had written a report that I put up on Twitter. At the time it was Twitter, and she retweeted it, like, saying she agreed with it. And that somehow showed that we're co-conspirators to try to overthrow the United States government. I mean, that's the level of evidence that they have. It's laughable. If it weren't so tragic, it would be funny. It's so stupid. Um, but it's awful, and I'm still in it. That case is still open. So still trying to get the courts to make an honest ruling, to just let us go, close the case out, but they don't really appear to want to do that.
Whenever is because looking how lawfare is used, obviously, whenever um, in the 4 years before President Trump won in 2024. Now we're in a different situation. But in terms of the legal attack, the lawfare against you and many others, I guess the concern is that those with deepest pockets win. Those who have most
Yeah,
money actually win. This is a money game,
yeah,
to see who goes bust first. But where does the kind of money come, the financial side, the funding come, in terms of who's going after you, and the
yeah.
officials, especially whenever you've got a good president in power?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that needs to be investigated. I actually have a motion pending in my Arizona case, because I found a money trail going from the Democrat Attorney General's Association, which is part of the Democrat Party, through a shell corporation or an LLC. I think it's an LLC. Anyway, through a shell organization, to the Arizona Attorney General in exchange for, or what appears to be in exchange for, um, them getting to prosecute us. They get to pick and choose who gets prosecuted. And so it's basically the Democrat organization paying $200,000 to the Arizona Attorney General, and then she turns around and indicts their political opponent at their direction. That's the key part, is it wasn't just, oh, she just did this. She was doing it at their direction. So it's scary. It is. And anytime you have something like that where it all comes down to money, is the people will always lose, because it will always go to corporations and NGOs that survive this, and the people, real American people, are left to fend for themselves, and it's a bleak picture. So I'm really hopeful that Donald Trump will root all of this out in the next 3.5 years, and hopefully it's all behind us. But it's not behind us yet.
I want to just come back and finish off with the bias and the corruption of judges. But you talk about money, and you end off the book looking at Dominion and
Yeah.
1.6 billion. I don't know if you've got 1.6 billion, Christina. Probably not.
Not in my pocket, no.
No, but that level of I mean, that strikes fear into any
Yeah.
any journalist, because they're trying to do their job, the vast majority of journalists. And if a company can come up to them and demand over $1 billion, then it's kind of game over in terms of independent media. So tell us about that.
Oh, it's terrifying. Yes, I was sued for $1.6 billion. And I never actually reported on Dominion. I was brought into the lawsuit for a social media post that was on One American News' website, where I had summarized the allegations against Dominion. But that was it. I never, other than that, and it never aired on television. It was just a YouTube clip. And they said for that wasn't even on my page. It was on One American News' page. But for that, they said they wanted $1.6 billion for me. And I don't have $1.6 billion, but they drugged me through it for 4 years. I was forced to defend it. Thankfully, that was covered by insurance. The legal fees were covered by insurance. Any damages were not covered by insurance for me. So I would have been responsible for it. It's terrifying. It's absolutely, absolutely terrifying, and really unfortunate that that's where we are, because you're exactly right. It does influence media. It influences independent journalism, and people who don't have an extra $1.6 billion laying around can't afford to risk saying something that those with a lot of money, that they can kind of force you into silence. So it's really, really ugly. It's very, very ugly. And this is how liberal, and this isn't just the Dominion case I'm talking about. Generally speaking, liberals are abusing our court system, and they're winning with it. That's why they're going hard and heavy in the civil system with Donald Trump right now, because they no longer have the criminal justice system to use as one of their weapons. So they've weaponized the civil justice system, and they're doing it through, requesting injunctions and trying to stop Donald Trump that way. And then they're suing all of his allies. So we need a revamp of our justice system for sure.
Well, on that, one of the chapters, judicial corruption run amok, and I think in the UK, our judges are nowhere near as politicized as they are in the US. And again, I've been confused of how you can get some backwater judge in some village actually stopping the deportation of any crazed terrorist that you have.
Yeah.
But in terms of that bias, the judicial bias, is there a way of combating that, or is part of that kind of built into the system?
No, there is very much a way. We have very good checks and balances if our elected officials would actually do their jobs. The way judges are held accountable is to be impeached. And there are several judges that need to be impeached. The problem is, in order to impeach, you have to have 2/3 conviction in the Senate. They'll get a conviction in the House, but I think we're short like 20 senators or 15 senators or whatever it is. The Democrats are never going to vote to impeach the judges doing their dirty work. So we're limited on, because our elected officials aren't demanding honesty from the bench, that check that is supposed to check the balance of power with the judiciary isn't working right now, because our elected officials aren't demanding honesty. And I mean, that's where it's at right now.
Just to finish off on kind of the call to action you want from the book to the public,
Yeah.
because in one way you want to tell the story warts and all, but people look at that and you think, I don't want to be in the same position as Christina.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm going to do kind of the opposite. How did you set out to tell the story, but without making Americans afraid to stand up and do the right thing?
Well, we're at a point where you have to. If you don't stand up and do the right thing, you'll be in my position. That's where we're at right now. Because they're coming so hard and so aggressively after everyday Americans, just like me, just like the electors, in 5 different states or whatever it is. They're coming after us. And we have to stand up and push back and say stop, meaning you either admit that what you did is overkill and we all agree to stop, which they're not doing. So if they're not going to agree to stop, then they have to be prosecuted themselves. That's where we're at. And so we have to have people who can stand up and say, those folks belong in jail. They shouldn't be infringing on our rights. They shouldn't be chilling the political process. They shouldn't be abusing their office. They need to be prosecuted. And you have to have the stomach to allow Donald Trump to do that. Because I think a lot of Americans right now are going, oh, I'm so sick of the law. Like, I don't like all the legal stuff. Like, please just stop. And they just want everybody to stop, which I agree. I get it. The problem is if we don't push back and we don't affirmatively ensure that the left can't do this to us anymore, you're next. Joe Smith in, Arkansas, you're next. I was the front lines, but they're coming for you. And so we have to be aggressive right now to fight back while we have the ability, or they will ensure we never get the ability again.
Well, Christina, I hope that you don't need to write another book. I mean, stealing your vote about the failures in the 2020 election, and this one, the left attacking Trump in Mar-a-Lago. I really hope you don't need to write a third book, because it worries me. If you see Christina's writing a book, oh no, what's happening? But no,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for your time, and great to know that you're working with Judicial Watch and helping them continue the fantastic work they do. So thank you so much for your time today, Christina.
Thank you.